Introducing On the Horizon, a podcast by Horizon Resources Cooperative, supporting farmers and ranchers across northwest North Dakota and northeast Montana. Join host Levi Hall as he engages with agronomy experts, grain traders, and community leaders, sharing insights to help you make confident, informed decisions for your operations. From market trends to practical advice, we bring you the conversations that matter.
Horizon Resources, solutions for your success.
Welcome back to another episode of On the Horizon. This week, we have Luke Dighans from Winfield United. Luke, a fellow former cooperative employee, now works for Winfield United with our team and gives them a lot of support. This episode is a great episode to listen to, honestly, throughout the entire growing season. I think you're going to pick up little tidbits from pre-emerge all the way to desiccation. Enjoy the show.
Microessentials has accounted for more than 1 billion additional bushels over commodity fertilizers in the last 15 years. Why? Because each granule holds just what your crops need in every single granule, giving you all the right nutrients to improve your yields. The Mighty Micro, packed with the good stuff.
Welcome to another episode of On the Horizon. This week's guest, Winfield United's Luke Dighans. Luke, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Levi. Appreciate you having me.
Absolutely.
Great to be here.
Well,
Yeah.
Luke, why don't we just start with a little bit of a background? Why don't you tell everyone about yourself, give us a little bit of your history, and tell us kind of about the story of Luke Dighans and how you got to where you are.
Well, not that interesting, I guess, but I guess we can start with, I've been with Winfield United now, probably a little over 2.5 years. Prior to that, I was actually an agronomy manager, similar to John Salvold up in northeast Montana.
Pro Co-op up in
Pro
Scobie,
Co-op in
Montana.
Scobie,
Yeah,
yep.
so, some would say that you were kind of like the cornerstone of that co-op.
Some would say. Some would argue with it.
Yeah.
We'll leave that one out to be deciphered. But yeah, no, we had a good time up there, and
How long did you do that job? How long were you in retail?
So I was in retail probably 12, 13 years, and the last 9 of that would have been with Pro Co-op as agronomy manager. I was doing agronomist type work as well, working with farmers. That's really why I got into the industry. Grew up on a farm up there, Peerless area, very similar cropping system as what Williston area would have. So I'd enjoy coming here, and I just started working with Horizon here probably less than a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of like almost being back home in a sense. I live in Billings now, so it's a little different scenery and some different things. I cover the whole state of Montana and part of northwest North Dakota. So being able to come back to this region, pulse crops, canola, durum, wheat, that whole 9 yards has been really good. So, and basically, took this job with Winfield United, looking at a little different career path. I can be probably more involved in the agronomy training. Sure, there's some sales involved and all that, but I work a lot with businesses like Horizon, large independent retailers that are just trying to do the right thing for the farmer. I think that's really where Winfield United comes from. I had a lot of experience being on your side of the table, I guess, from the retail, working with Winfield. And so I felt, the next step in the career would be to work with people that really value research, doing the right thing, not some fancy sales pitch all the time, just, quality stuff and doing the right thing for the farmer. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those that don't know, Pro Co-op and Horizon Resources have had a long-standing, very good relationship between the two. There's no rail that services Scobie, Montana. So through springtime, if we need to help out in a pinch, we're more than willing to help out. So a little bit of a connect the dots there for the listeners.
You bet. Yeah.
Long-standing, great relationship between the two cooperatives. Now, my understanding is you've also done a handful of trips to DC. And that's something that I think North Dakota, Northeast Montana is really the light bulb moment has started to come on. I'm on the North Dakota Grain Dealers Board, and we've had a lot more conversations about should we be doing fly-ins to advocate for the grain industry. And the NGFA does a good job, National Grain and Feed Association. But there's that old adage where if you're not at the table, you're on the table. So talk a little bit about your trips to DC What were they for, and what do you think happened as a result of them?
Yeah, so it's been a few years, I guess, since I got off the board, but I spent 6 years on the Montana Ag Business Association board, which represents basically, in some senses, everybody in the chain besides the farmer. I mean, the farmer is obviously the ultimate people that we're speaking up for, but there's a whole group of people, Horizon Resources included, Winfield United included, a lot of different chemical manufacturers, fertility places, equipment, and having a voice there, making sure that DC understands that the technology we're bringing is vetted. It's important. We have to make sure that we can provide things at a sustainable way, cost effective to farmers to be able, so that they can keep going. And so I was on that board, president the last couple of years, and we went to, I think it's probably been 4 or 5 times since that I've been out to DC. And really what we tried to do is get out there and say, look, some of these things, these claims that you see on the internet or whatever, glyphosate, for example, and the dangers there's more to the story there. We're a pretty self-regulating industry. And for example, if glyphosate were to go away, you lose a lot of the no-till. What happens when no-till goes away? You have blowing, you have erosion, you have all kinds of things. And in fact, you got to bring back some of the old nasty herbicides from, way back when, and it's actually a detriment. And so there's a lot of that sort of stuff. But I really felt it was important to stick up for local. Of course, we have, MABA was supported by the Ag Retailers Association and some other national groups like that. But really honing in on, Montana, especially eastern Montana, where I'm from, Northwest North Dakota, we're kind of a niche group.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not all corn and beans. It's people can switch crops on a dime pretty much. We have extreme ups and downs with weather. And so there's a little different challenges going on that our farmers face, and therefore our industry faces in this area. And so it was really important to get out there. It was more probably a learning experience for me than anything, than what I could bring to the table. You get into some different U.S. senators' offices, and you see all the different staffing going on, and there's a lot of 20, 21, 22-year-olds that are running around, kind of basically giving them all the details, and they got to make decisions on the go. So very good experience. I'd encourage anybody to get involved, whether it's a farm group, whether it's an industry group, grain, feed, whatever it is. It's worth the time. And I guess the takeaway from that is sometimes you think that they don't listen. Somebody's listening. Yeah. Now, you may not always get the result that you want, but they know their constituents. They know the value to, say, North Dakota or Montana of the ag industry and what we bring to the table there. And so they're listening, and it does make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think especially in those two states, a lot of their the reasons that they're in DC is because they won the farm vote. And so sure. They need to listen to those constituents, especially. It's not like you're coming in with some obscure group. This is a group that's been around for hundreds of years that's saying, hey, we're doing production agriculture in the state. We're going to keep doing production agriculture in this state. And they know that that's important to keeping their seat in D.C.
Yeah, so, absolutely. Yep.
But it really does convey the importance of, like you said, you get to D.C., you get to meet with these very young interns and staffers, and you give them the bullet points. And it's really critical that that message is clearly articulated so that those individuals get the right bullet points down and get that back, because you're really playing a game of telephone.
Yep, absolutely. And it's a little, it's intimidating going in there, obviously. And you only have, you might meet with, for us, it was U.S. Senator Diggins, U.S. Senator Tester at the time, 20 minutes, half an hour, and you've got all these priorities and all this stuff. And you got to realize too that these guys are getting hit hard from a lot of different places.
Right.
So we would try to think of it differently. Yeah. We would try to be, hey, we might be all wearing suits, but we're the guys sitting down at the coffee shop, down at the elevator, having a cup of joe. Like, yes, we're here for a reason, but we can identify with the average person there, and hopefully you can too. And here's our priorities. Here's what we feel is important, and try to establish that relationship that way. So, yeah, very good experience.
So Winfield United has this Innovation Academy. I know we recently sent a couple people. I think Austin and Sarah out of the Williston office just recently went.
Yep.
Why don't you explain to our growers where exactly they're going and what they're doing while they're at this Innovation Academy?
Yeah, they probably want to know. So the Winfield United Innovation Center, it's actually in River Falls, Wisconsin, just across the border into Wisconsin from the Twin Cities. And what it is it's basically a state-of-the-art, we could call it a greenhouse, but that really doesn't do it justice. It's this huge facility where you can emulate any sort of environment any time of the year. You can raise some plants up there on large scale plots indoors, and say you want to see the effects of a biological under 10% humidity and 45-degree Fahrenheit temperature or whatever. Mm-hmm. And the soil is saturated, not saturated, dry, too hot, too cold, all that stuff. And so that's part of it. And there's also wind tunnels, which sounds like some Star Trek stuff, but really what they go on with the wind tunnels, and this is really part of Winfield's, what really, puts their stake in the ground is testing, quote unquote, what is the fate of a droplet when you're spraying out there. And we all know in Northwest North Dakota, a little breezy sometimes, again, too hot, too cold, too dry, too wet, whatever it is, what happens to that droplet? And even in the absence of, say, wind for drift, and obviously we can measure drift, there's cameras that go down to 60,000 frames per second. Wow. So you have a pulsating nozzle, say like an AIM Command or John Deere's version of that. You can see exactly what's going on with those fines. Where's that going? And so even in the absence of wind, you can real time measure how much of those are the size, bowling ball size droplets, how many of those are so tiny that the lack of humidity just evaporates that. So where does that, you spend 20, 30, 40 bucks an acre in a herbicide or fungicide, how much is that? Where is that droplet going? And so we can measure that through these wind tunnels. I use the phrase all the time, and because I come from a family farm, my father-in-law still farms up there. How many guys are spraying at 8 mile an hour using 20 gallons of water an acre, and you have the right droplet size, the right pressure, the right speed, all that sort of stuff. It's, there's some big fields around here. Guys are under the gun. They're going to go as fast as they can. So even in the absence of wind, you can get a lot of things happen to that, and we can measure all that stuff. So
that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Our guys never spray over 7 miles an hour. So,
of course. Yeah. I would assume so. Yeah. Follow the rules.
That's right. Yep. Mainly it's, you guys are studying not just the efficacy of your guys' products, but also the practical application of the product, and trying to help work with those farmers so that if there's some type of scenario where you get called out to a field, you've got a little bit of a history of like, well, we've seen this when we cranked the wind speed up to 20 and, that type of stuff. So it just gives and it helps with our retail team. That's why, our retail team has been down there. You guys are helping educate them a little bit as well.
Yeah. I think that's really important. That's really been important for me, when I moved on from pro, is working with a company that really, we talk statistics. Nobody really loves statistics unless you're a mathematician. Yeah. I never thought I'd use statistics ever again after college. Well, right. You can really, there's a lot of marketing that goes on out there. I split a field. This side of the field did better than that side of the field once in Williston. Right. And now I'm going to promote that all over the United States as true. Well, technically that's true, but is it repeatable? Is that statistically proven? And Winfield United goes almost to a fault when we bring out things or test other things for other people. We want to make sure that confidence level is extremely high, where if a university does it, if you do it, if I do it, whatever, odds are you're going to see the same result, and not just by chance. So it's not just our stuff. That's what's nice about it. So Winfield United is really a distributor by trade. Yeah, we have our own things and we design our own stuff, but we work with the BSFs, FMCs, Syngenas, all the big hitters in the world. They're the ones that develop these, do the research and development on the molecule themselves, why they're the modes of action, different things like that. But our kind of motto, I guess you could say, is if you're going to kill something, kill it dead. Mm-hmm. If you're going to spray for a disease, get to where the disease is. It doesn't do you any good if you're out, say a local issue, if you're spraying chickpeas and you go out there and you think you're doing everything right. But those droplets are only making it down 4 or 5 inches in the canopy. Well, where does all that ascochyta and other sort of diseases start from? It's way down in there. Right. It could be that. It could be there's a lot of people getting into no-till around here with stripper headers.
Yep.
So where are those weeds growing? Mm-hmm. Those weeds are way down, an inch, sometimes even less. And if you've got 2-3 feet of straw to get through, you got to figure something out, because you don't want all that stuff getting tied up top. So that's really what we do, is we take what other people have designed in order to kill the weeds or save the plant or whatever, and get it to where it's onto and into.
Yeah. So Luke, one of the things we want to talk about today was adjuvants. Why don't you give us a little bit of what are adjuvants and why should guys be using them?
Yeah, so that's that term is again going back to the statistics of things out there, whether it's a fertilizer, whether it's a herbicide, whether it's anything you buy for your household. There's a lot of things out there that are noisy in marketing. Adjuvants is really messy. Basically the whole point of an adjuvant is to take, like we were talking about, it's getting that droplet onto and into the plant through there's a lot of different reasons for different classes of adjuvants.
Unfortunately, there's not a lot of regulation out there on them. There's not a third party regulator that says, you have to label your adjuvant that claims this and prove that it does this. So really, years ago, Winfield United set out to kind of be the leader in that. And I truly believe they are, through all this innovation center type research, going into large scale things like the answer plot. And, even back at the lab, say, we want to measure how much glyphosate gets into the plant leaf, with and without, say, class act NG. And we take things like confocal microscopy, radioactive dye. You can spray a whole group of plants, and then wash that off, and then figure out, how much is still on the leaf, how much is in the rinsate, how much got in the plant. And so there's a lot of stuff that goes on there to try to prove that, hey, we're coming up with what we say. It's doing what it says it should. And so there's a lot of different categories of that. I'd probably first start with just thinking of it logically, chronologically. You're getting prepped to go to the field, right? It's pre-plant and burn down season. You've got, say, some small kochia and a whole smattering of grasses and this.
We
and
don't
that.
have kochia here.
No. Oh, good. Yeah. I'm sure you don't. Yeah. I think I've watched a few other podcasts before to say different.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that's your weed spectrum. You picked out what you're going to do. First thing you got to do is make sure your tank is you get your water conditioned correctly. Well, what does that mean? I mean, there's a lot of different ways to condition the water. Ammonium sulfate is the most proven, most actively used version of conditioning the water. Basically, what we're trying to do is use sulfate to tie up all the hard ions in the water, calcium, iron, magnesium, all that sort of stuff, so that things like glyphosate, weak acid herbicides like glyphosate, you don't plan on 32 ounces an acre, but by the time half of it's tied up in the tank, before it even makes it out of nozzle, you're only at 16 ounces an acre because of that tie up. And that's what ammonium sulfate and ammonium sulfate based adjuvants do. Now, what Class Act NG is, it's a true ammonium sulfate based, but there's also a large rate of non-ionic surfactant and what they call corn sorb technology, which is think of it as if this was a can of Mountain Dew and I spilled it all over this table, it's going to stay there for a while. It's going to be sticky. It's going to be wet long. It's not going to come off very easily. And that's really, it's a patented thing that Winfield United has to basically keep that droplet wetter longer and act as a humectant to stick that to the plant. So there's a lot of ways you can condition the water, but again, you want that combination when you're going out there and you're spraying the kochia or whatever it is, to stick that stuff to those tiny little hairs and leaves on there.
So was Mountain Dew the secret ingredient to get the patent?
Yeah, I'm sworn to secrecy.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, maybe it was Dr. Pepper.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure. Yeah, something like that. But yeah,
But it's a great analogy. Really.
Yeah, I mean, I try to use that all the time so people understand that. So yeah, I mean, the first step is conditioning the water. You're going to be out there and get that stuff going. We talked about things like drift mitigation, the wind tunnel things that we do there. Well, now you want to get it onto the plant. We're not even worried about getting into the plant yet. You want to get it onto the plant. Now, you don't always need to add every adjuvant on top of each other all the time. I mean, I know I'm going to have some farmers on here saying, well, yeah, just fill that tank full of adjuvants and you should be good. So, I mean, I get that. But, in the right conditions and the right scenario, stripper stubble, for example, things like interlock it's been on millions and millions of acres. I want to say it was like 800 million acres in 20 years. We've tried to come up with something better, and we haven't been able to outdo our statistics per se.
Yeah.
And so things like interlock are really important for keeping those droplets the same size. It doesn't make them bigger. It doesn't make them smaller. It keeps them the same size, and you deposit things down in the canopy a lot better. And then you can, go a step further. Say we're spraying clethodim in crop for grasses and pulse crops. Well, you need a lot of those type of herbicides need either a crop oil concentrate or methylated seed oil. Our premium one would be Strike Lock. It's a high concentrate methylated seed oil, high surfactant, and it also has the interlock in there. It has the stuff that's driving it down into the canopy. So what you're doing there with MSOs and crop oil concentrates, Superb HC would be an example of a crop oil concentrate, is you're really getting it on the leaf. Now, because of the way that mode of action works, you need to burn it through the cuticle. So there's some things you just need to spread the AI out. There's some things you don't need to do any of that with. Some things you need to basically trick it into being fertilizer so it takes the AI up. But with certain chemistries, you need to actually burn it through that cuticle. And so things like Strike Lock are designed for that. There's a lot of videos we have on YouTube. I mean, all you got to do is Google, any of these Strike Lock, Master Lock, Interlock, all that stuff. And there's a lot of these, slow motion spray. You can watch the pattern changes. You can watch the drift rolling off the boom. You can actually watch a plant, over the course of 10 days on a time-lapse video. This is what happens if you spray, say, Sharpen without an adjuvant. This is what happens when you spray Sharpen with Strike Lock. And there's a massive difference there. And so, that's really at the end of the day what these adjuvants are doing. There's different reasons why you'd use a different one in different situations. And it really comes down to working with your local agronomist. And that's where, we really want to partner with Horizon and make sure they're in the know so that there's not such a thing as a one size fits all. There might be some companies out there that preach that, but I'm still a believer in doing the right thing for the right acre and the right situation. And that's why we want to have your crew up to speed in what we're doing, and so that they can tailor that to the local farmer and what they got going.
Luke, we've all used pliers as a hammer, right? And maybe it got some result, but was it the most efficient result?
Right.
Absolutely not. And that's what I think of when I think about this. You've got a bunch of different tools in that toolbox. Make sure you're using the right one. Go into our staff here. We've got all of our locations, go through a lot of training with you and your team. And so they're well-versed. If they don't know, They know how to get a hold of you to find the right answer. And frankly, our team relies a lot on each other too. We've got a few CCAs here on staff, and our staff will call each other internally if they can't get a hold of someone like yourself. So great resources here at Horizon Resources. There's strength in numbers for sure, but make sure you're using that right tool in that toolbox.
And that's a great point. Kudos to Horizon Resources. I mean, I really feel, and that's where we kind of go back to the long relationship between Pro Co-op and in my former life and Horizon. I think there's a lot of similarities on visions as far as, I know John Selvold really well, the head of agronomy here, and it's really agronomy focused first. Yeah, we need to sell things to make a living, but it's really keeping that farmer in mind first, and walking through, maybe you need a recommendation on this and that. Let's have a plan A, B, and C. Best, better, maybe the worst case scenario, because you don't want to spend the money or whatever. And I think that's really important, to give people options and show that you're willing to go the extra mile to do a little research. I know you got a lot of people on your team with a background in research, and like you said, talking amongst each other. I think people learn a lot from what your local agronomist. I maybe seen something in the field over here and following up on a recommendation I made and sharing that with a group. I think a person learns more that way than just any sort of book or video. So,
yeah, absolutely. Yep. You can't beat being able to have the interactive conversation, so you get your follow-up questions answered. And the network, and that's really a big reason that we started this podcast, was to show the network that our staff has, to show the talented people that we work with, like yourself, Luke. So yeah, it's been the people that we work with, we're very particular. They have to be the best of the best. We work with the best. So
yeah,
let's talk a little bit about some pesticide labels and some of the EPA Endangered Species Act compliances, Luke. How do we navigate this?
So obviously we're in an evolving regulatory world, year by year, sometimes day by day. There's a lot of moving pieces to that depending on the administration. But one thing that has been fairly constant lately is this Endangered Species Act. And, that's a lot of actually when I was going to DC, making sure that the EPA and these legislators influencing that had the right info, that some of these rules don't get so overreaching, that they're so out of touch and it really hinders production ag. What has kind of happened now in this latest version of the Endangered Species Act is you take basically any sort of label for any active ingredient that gets rewritten or newly brought to the market needs to comply with this. So it doesn't apply to things that are already out there. And as long as that label doesn't get rewritten, then that'll stay the same. But really, you're talking about two things. You're talking about drift mitigation and runoff mitigation. I know you have some irrigation in the area, in the Fairview area and whatnot. That may apply there, but I'd say the biggest thing that people need to be paying attention to is the drift mitigation. So what it's saying is any of these new labels that come out, you need to keep a 10-foot buffer from any source of water or any non-desirable drift area, including your field edges and all that stuff, unless you're using an approved drift reduction technology product. So it's not just Winfields, there's others out there, but we do like Interlock, all the lock families that we talked about, those are on that list of approved products. So what happens if you're using Interlock now, instead of leaving a 10-foot buffer, now you can go right to the field edge. And I think that's extremely important. We talk about resistant management. Where does a lot of times the resistant populations come from? If you think about you're doing your field borders, you're going around, you might miss, you're not right on the fence line, might be off a little bit. So some of those plants might only get half, a third, depending on which way the wind's drifting of a dose. You come around a corner and your boom's swinging like this, it's now going 10 times as fast as you would be on a straightaway. So that some newer technology can keep up with that, but the old ones, they wouldn't compensate to adjust that rate on the corners. And so if you're already trying your best to do that, but now you have to leave a 10-foot buffer for those weed spectrums to grow and reproduce and are still getting micro rates of chemistries, it's really only going to speed up this resistance issue a lot more, whether it's kochia or anything else. And so the value of using the drift reduction technology, I mean, obviously nobody wants to drift.
Mm-hmm.
But if you got to be watching that anyway, if you got to be trying to make sure that things get to where they're going to go, make sure you're looking at a product that is on that list. In case I'm not exactly sure how they plan on enforcing this, but obviously there's a lot of ways that they could check records and different things, especially with as applied maps now.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the double-edged sword of technology, right?
Yep.
I mean, if they came in and said, we need to see your maps, that's a much different conversation today than it was 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, for sure. Yep.
So now let's talk a little bit about Gramoxone and glyphosate and the use case scenarios. So
Sure.
Tell me a little bit about the best case and best time to use each.
So it's been interesting as the weed spectrums evolved. Hopefully we're not into a scenario yet where we have to religiously start using paraquat or Gramoxone in a spring burn down.
Right.
That's a bad day. I mean, nobody wants to have to use that, but unfortunately I listened to the one with Ryan Hunt on here, and that was a great example of some of these chemistries. A lot of group 14s have been used. We're starting to see some things pop up that Brian Jinks has discovered. You really don't want to have to go there unless you have to, unless you really have to and try to switch things up. When it comes to Gramoxone or things like that, really what we're looking at is for your area, it's desiccation timing. A lot of peas and lentils, more so lentils than peas, getting desiccated. And so no different than when we were talking earlier, how do you get that droplet to where it needs to be to do its job of whatever active ingredient? It's no different than Gramoxone. You're going out there and things are really hot and dry usually when you're desiccating. Sure, you want to use a lot of water, but making sure that droplet size, you don't want these bowling ball sized droplets hitting that leaf, rolling onto the ground, and not having that coverage. You want to drive that stuff in there. And so I think there's two scenarios where I would look at. We actually had really good luck last year. If the crop isn't extremely weedy, you're just going to kill the lentils per se, get them to dry down for harvest. I would look at using Master Lock. Again, lock, we all know where that comes from.
Yep.
But Master Lock is the NIS. It's non-ionic surfactant plus corn sorb. And what you're doing there, you get it down on the canopy, but you're actually spreading that stuff out on a leaf. So think of it as more touch points. If you have a plate here and I put my fingers down, there's 5 touch points. But what if you had 1,000 touch points on that same plate?
Right.
You're much more likely to get that Gramoxone to work and kill that green material using something like Master Lock. I would say where I would think about switching that up is, let's say your pre-plant burn down didn't work, you didn't have anything going on, you got one of those fields that pretty ugly, there's a lot of weeds. How am I going to combine this? How am I going to get through this?
Yeah.
I would look at maybe switching to Strike Lock in that case, because then you're heating things up. You got the methylated seed oil, high surfactant concentrate, and you still have the lock technology to drive it down through these huge kochia plants to try to get that down in there. But that's a case where you really want more of a burning action. And so there's 2 different scenarios there. Again, it's just about making sure whatever application you're doing is done the right way. And these things they're not huge investments. I mean, it is some for sure, but it's a small insurance to make sure the larger investment you've already made in the AI is going to do its job.
Right. Absolutely. So going into the growing season, I mean, geez, we're getting 50-degree days. I mean, it feels like guys should be pulling the air seeders out and working on them already.
Yeah.
What are you looking for? What are going to be the big challenges this year, and what are you excited about?
Well, it's it's interesting. It's always a different year in this part of the world. I know there's a lot of tension around commodity markets, ROIs, all that sort of stuff. Financing is a big issue right now. There's a lot of headwinds, and certain places are drier than others. But it's not all doom and gloom. I think that what is great about this region is its ability to adapt.
Yeah.
You're not locked into corn or beans or even all wheat or all durum.
Yeah.
People can switch, people can adapt. And I think it's just at the end of the day, for those worried about this thing and penciling things out, I get it. It's a big deal. But you still need to raise the bushels. You still need to raise the quality. That's what you ultimately get paid on at the end of the day.
Yep.
So I would caution guys. I know it's a risk reward scenario, but I would caution guys on getting too lean on the things that build that plant.
Yeah.
Fertility, number one. Just doing the right thing in the right scenario. Now more than ever, doing the right thing in the right scenario. Maybe not broad brushing your entire farm with one thing, but looking at it more as a field by field or farm by farm scenario. So you maybe invest more here, but less here.
Yeah.
And that's going to be really important going forward.
I've always said I could tell at the grain elevator who spent their money agronomically.
Really?
I feel like I could tell the guys that did not try and cut corners. I see it in the quality at the elevator. So I'm a firm believer in that too, Luke. I think it's one of the last places that you should cut. But obviously, this ag climate right now looks like we're in a little bit of a tough spot. So, but go work with the team and figure out where can we pinch, because there's good spots and there's bad spots, but work with them and maybe, like you talked about, those good, better, best scenarios.
Yep.
Maybe instead of best, we try better for this year because that's what the checkbook's telling us. But yeah, I'm a firm believer in agronomic spend. I think that it pays back every time. So
yeah,
cool.
Yep.
Well, Luke, thanks so much for taking the time to come on the podcast. I really appreciate it. And if you ever get up to Scobie, tell those Pro Co-op boys to come on down for an episode.
We could probably arrange a safety meeting or something like that.
That sounds great. All right. Well, thanks again, Luke, for coming on the podcast.
Thanks, Levi.
Thank you for tuning in to On the Horizon. If our conversation today sparked your interest, make sure to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform. Stay connected by following @Horizon Resources Co-op on Facebook and Instagram and explore the world of agriculture with us. We're excited to continue bringing you real conversations with Horizon Resources industry partners, member owners, and employees, discovering more about your local neighbors and community friends. Until next time, keep looking towards the horizon.
Horizon Resources, solutions for your success.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not to be used or considered as an offer or a solicitation to buy or sell commodities. Horizon Resources does not make any representation, warranty, or guarantee as to the completeness, accuracy, timeliness, or suitability of any information contained within any part of this podcast. Horizon Resources does not accept any liability for any loss or damage, including without limitation loss of profit, which may arise directly or indirectly from use or reliance on such information. Whilst the information provided has been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, Horizon Resources does not attest to its accuracy or completeness. Horizon Resources reserves the right to change any source without restriction or notice. The information herein is indicative only and is subject to change.